ignoring woke, and we've got to find a better word because woke is so fucking meaningless and impenetrable a word. Just saying. So, I like the idea of being a product of a learned skill because it's like baseball. I'm not a sports guy. I know from baseball. Baseball is a boys' game played by men. Okay? And at a certain point, you sort of run out of steam. Okay? But I'm still steaming. Okay? Because that lack of natural gifts meant that my capacity to learn continues to evolve. I spent 15 years working in television, which is basically why I moved to California, because I woke up one morning in 1984 and realized that I had no prospects. And as a cult figure, I've never been a star in comics. I'm a cult figure. I'm the Randy Newman of comics. You know, Randy Newman is a guy that if you're a civilian, you don't know a lot about Randy, you know 3 songs. You know, Short People. You know, I Love LA. If you have children under the age of 20, you know, You Got a Friend in Me. You got a friend in me. Okay. But there's an entire body of work back there that nobody knows about, except if you're enthusiastic about Randy Newman. It's like Van Morrison. Everybody knows Moondance. Everyone knows exactly like you, but nobody knows about all that other shit. Okay. I'm that guy. Everybody knows about Star Wars, but look at this cat. Okay. A lot of guys have no idea. And the metrics speak for me. The metrics are, here's the deal. There are 250,000 people in the entire United States, including Canada and Mexico, who buy all the comics we make. Think about that number for a moment. What a million people.
That ain't very many out of 300.
Nothing goes by you. 250,000 people. Okay? Out of that 250,000 people, I would say maybe 35,000 of them know that I did anything other than Star Wars. I guarantee you that's the case. And here's the other metric. The greatest genius in the history of comics is Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige, who runs Marvel Productions. Because Kevin Feige is monetized to the tune of billions. Billions. Creative material based on material which 99.99% of the audience spending those billions of dollars has neither any idea that it exists, and if they do know, they don't give a shit. The very fact that there has been no blowback and advancement of the comic book form unto itself as the rampaging wave of superhero films, and I'm talking about Marvel's films more than anything else, because the DC films, they're catch as catch can. The Marvels are of a piece. And Marvel's films feel like Marvel comics. They really do. You know, it's just, there's a through line that when I saw the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, the second hour did nothing for me, but that first hour I felt like I was reading Amazing Fantasy 15. It was like, holy shit. They've got it right. It was Stan and Steve completely. And it's true, it really runs through that. That is an astonishing reality. It points out the utter and complete irrelevance of what we're talking about today. The fact that we are living in what is functionally an epistolary business. We are sharing letters between each other. Okay. It is so small in enthusiasm, so tiny in enthusiasm. It's smaller even than those hipster schmucks who think they get better sound out of an LP. All those pops, gives it authenticity. Remember authenticity? Faking honesty? That's what it's all about. This doesn't make me happy, but it's not a reality that can be ignored. Those of us who grew up reading comic books from Word One have always had the love-hate relationship with the audience, with the world being aware of what we did. Okay? I mean, I remember being mocked and ridiculed for reading comics when I was a kid. I think that's an experience that was, I don't know how it was like for guys born in 1960 or 70. I was born in 50. And it was like, hey, what is this, you know? Please. So, what we have now is Hollywood, which is basically the guys who used to beat us up for reading comics in high school making money off our fucking asses. Okay? Irony indeed. So we have that love-hate relationship with the world knowing what we do. On the one hand, we love the fact that we're in a cult. Comics is that calling, it's that cult, we are Jesuits. You know, we hear the vote of incense, the vote of candles, we hear the bell. And we don't want to share that with anybody. On the other hand, we want everybody to love the shit we love. And the irony of that is that constant conflict that exists there. So, I love the form of comics rather, but I'm not really interested in the content. The content is plastic and free form for me. I was telling Jason Aaron a couple of hours ago, the last comic book I read regularly was Scalped. And I read it for him, because I found the artwork occasionally off-putting, and I found it colored garishly and uninteresting. But I thought it was an incredibly compelling narrative. It was a well-made book. So I don't really care about the material. What I care about is the language. I really love the language of comics. And I'll never draw as well as Will does. Will's does. But I'll put a picture together better than he ever will. I'll make a page better than he ever will. I'll make a book better than he ever will. By the standards and terms that comics demand. Not rippling muscle, but narrative. Sensible narrative. Panel to panel, page to page. Microcosmic relationships between the panel and the page and the book. Because I had to learn how to do this shit and not know it instinctually. Questions? Anyone? Chat with me besides this guy? Cowards. What's that?
How'd you make it through those years?
Which years?
The middle part with in Marvel.
In the 80s?
Yeah.
Well, I struggled because I wasn't very good. And what ultimately happened was I was thrown out of Marvel by Jim Shooter. I got into a screaming match with him on a Good Friday. And he'd done something that was really reprehensible in my mind. And I left comics, and I became a paperback man. And I was lucky. I worked in the paperback business. In '82, Reagan's policies had a dramatic effect on book sales and book distribution. I forget the exact details, it's been a long time. But my rate went from 3,000 to cover to about 12 to 1,500 to cover. So my income was cut by 50%. Concurrent, and I was in the process of literally this is the boring shit, this is the real world stuff. I put myself into enormous debt to work for Byron Price. No one got rich working for Byron Price except for Byron Price. And I was in enormous credit card debt. And I was working to clean it up, and then the bottom fell out of this. And then out of the blue, I get this offer from Hearst Comics. I had no idea why Hearst Comics ever made the offer to have me do American Flag. I don't think there's anything I did that demonstrated to them that I was worth the kind of money they were offering. They offered me a shitload of money. Money that would literally enable me to get out of debt and have a life. And I was deeply grateful. And to this day, I think it's the best book first ever published. I honestly do. It's certainly the most influential book that they ever published. It changed a lot of the language of the form. The problem is, it changed the language of the form for talent, not for the audience. Because it came out around the same time as Watchmen, and actually it preceded Watchmen, and Ronin and Dark Knight. But those books reached, the DC marketplace of 150,000 books in their first sales. I sold 48,000 copies of Flag. But the people who bought Flag all became professionals in the 90s. And the great irony, of course, is that they were using the techniques that I used in the same way that, they had great accents but no language. And a complete misunderstanding and misrepresentation of the pattern and trope. And there's also an enormous cultural amnesia in the business. You can't know how many times I've tried to explain to somebody, no, I did not borrow that particular technique or that particular approach idea from that guy. He got it from me, but if you want to interview me next time, do some fucking research, I got through because Flag generated an enormous amount of interest in me in Hollywood. I moved to Hollywood to get into the movie business and ended up in television. And my CV in 1986 generated the work that I got. Today, if I had my CV today, if I were 40, and in Hollywood today, I'd have a seven-figure development deal at any number of studios. They didn't know what to do with us back then. Comics were perceived, and continue to be perceived, as a genre as opposed to a medium. Okay, they associate Archie and Chris Ware and Archie and Batman. They're all the same. It's just because it's panels. It's the same thing. Roy tells a story about doing a pitch for an adaptation of one of the Robert E. Howard minor novels that had been done in the comic book form. and they rejected it because the women weren't attractive enough. But it's going to be played by live action women. There's no gap to leave. Okay? Well, it's, you know, look, if Washington is Hollywood for ugly people, Hollywood is organized crime for people who don't really like guns that much. And, you know, so there you go. Someone else? Come on, you babies.
What was it like?
Phenomenal. I miss him terribly. All the more because I realized that I had an epiphany about a year ago where I realized that I finally achieved all the shit he thought we'd hoping to get. I met Bill when I was 13. I went to work for him when I was 18. He was an awe-striking figure. And I was terrible. I didn't do any actual hands-on work for him, but I watched him work and I learned the rhythm and method of how he did. And I tell the story anecdotally. This is in the days before there was VCRs and DVDs. And I came in the office one day and he said, we're working until 2 and then we're taking a break for 2 hours. Okay. And in those days, everybody in the business, all comic book artists, had these 9-inch black and white Panasonic portables in this plastic, yellow plastic. We all had them. Everyone had them bolted to their drawing tables. So you'd work in the middle of the night watching TV. And we sat there and watched a movie called Cover Girl with Gene Kelly, Phil Silvers, and a young Rita Hayworth. And he annotated the movie for me for 2 hours, analyzing the performance. And it was an absolutely breathtaking experience, unrepeatable. And it made me think and see his work through eyes that were transformed. Years later, a good 12 years later, I was in the theater. I was seeing a show called Dancing by Bob Fosse. And there were a number of dancers doing Aaron Copland's Rodeo in choreography that was adapted by Fosse from Agnes de Mille. And they were doing these Baryshnikov-like type leaps. And I turned to Leslie, my wife, and I said, holy fuck, those are Gil Kane characters up there. And she knew Gil, and she knew his work. She said, no shit. My God, yeah. So yes, he was a huge influence on my life. And a very difficult and very complex guy. You know, understand, he was difficult. You know. Someone else? Come on. I can go on. Is there anything I haven't covered you want to hear about? So, yes. He's married. He's divorced from my first wife. Ran into? I had dinner with him 2 weeks ago. What about him?
What kind of artist is it?
I like Jim. I mean, Jim and I we've known each other for a long time. We operate in totally different universes. I mean, literally, when I divorced my first wife, she dated him and married him about a year later. They're divorced. We're both much happier men, trust me. She was not a horrible person, but she was sort of, there was a metaphor about her in that she had, without makeup, she had no face. She had champagne-colored eyelashes and champagne-colored eyebrows. She was like a kabuki dancer. She didn't put on a face. He's okay. I mean, he's not someone I care about as an artist particularly. I mean, he's not. You can't see any resonance in what he does and what I do. The guys whose work of my generation that I look at are guys like Simonson. Simonson, I think, is an absolute giant in the field. He really is. The fact that at his age, he's older than I am, and is doing work on Ragnarok that is staggeringly good. In the service of work that doesn't interest me at all. I don't care about Norse myths, just like, kill me now. But the work is just fucking amazing. It's just, there's a confidence to it, there's an assuredness to it, there's a conviction to it. It just kicks ass. The guys whose work I look at today, who are alive, most of the guys I look at are dead, are Lionel Yu, and particularly Eduardo Risso. Eduardo Risso is so fucking good. Oh God, he's the best. I love his work. And what's that? You don't like his stuff? You don't know who he is? You don't know Eduardo Risso? You know Eduardo Risso? No, him. You, the guy who asked me about Starling. You know Eduardo Risso stuff?
I was expressing anything.
Oh no, do you know Eduardo?
No, tell me more about it.
No. You'll find out in your own damn self. Fuck it. Yeah. Someone else? We have 5 minutes of fun. Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about Star Wars, if you don't mind.
Okay.
4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, what kind of information? What did you have to start your drawings? You know, like pre-production.
Okay. I get a letter from George, who asked me to do the book. Okay. I knew George because George was the half owner of a comic book store in New York City called Super Sniper. Yes, where he got his, the character of Han Solo was clearly inspired by Cody Starbuck. Those of you who know this stuff should know this stuff. It's true. Believe me. And I came out to California, and we went to the original prop store where they were actually doing the work. It was I guess it was in Burbank. No, this is in the Burbank. Their office was in the egg factory, but the actual factory end was in Burbank. And I got there the day they were building the Death Star. Not the Death Star, Darth Vader's flagship. Which the actual model is about the size of a fridge.
Star Destroyer.
What's that?
Star Destroyer.
The big fat airplane, whatever the fuck it was.
Yeah.
And it was hanging from the ceiling. And it was built out of Tamiya tank model parts, transistor radios, and other nonsense. And I was a model builder when I was a kid, and it was just like, oh, I love this stuff. And they had, you know, various trenches on the star, on the Death Star, and all this, then models of different scale. You know, had a Millennium Falcon that was about the size of a Galapagos Island tortoise, and you know, all this other stuff. And I ultimately had 400 stills from the movie, and the 17 McQuarrie paintings. Okay. And the stills were inert. They looked like IKEA. Okay. So it started, and now, one of the reasons that writers like to work with me is that I do much of their work for them, and they don't have to pay me. I ended up breaking the script down, okay? And Roy got the money for the writing, even though I broke it down from the script, which happens a lot. That's why I became a writer, because I got tired of not collecting that cash. Because those of you who don't like to hear this, it's a job. And so I'm working from the stills. And I see the movie, I've done 2.5 issues of the book. And I'm sitting in one of those old school movie palaces in New York City, which no longer exists. It was either the Capitol or the State, I don't recall. It was a Wednesday. There were 6 other people in the theater. And I'm watching the movie. And it's pretty fucking amazing. Impressive looking, I mean, I don't care about it, it's just about the same. It's all, I recognize every single line of bullshit in the movie, because I've grown up watching movies. I mean, oh, there's 661 Squadron, you know, there's this whole thing about Dam Busters, you know, please, I know this movie. Oh my God, Edgar Rice Burroughs really have shame. What made the movie work is that it was the first time the movie, now production trainings are aspirational. Do you understand the concept of aspiration? In this case, this is what we really want the movie to look like, even though we're fucking nuts. This is a case where the movie looked like the production sketches, like McQuarrie's paintings. It really did. And the legend about the movie costing $9 million, not really. It cost $9 million to bring it in, and they spent at least that much money on post. I'm one of those people, I've only seen the first 2 movies, okay? I halfway saw the third one on VCR, my phone rang, I picked up the phone, and never went back to see the rest of the movie. I know we won because there wasn't another one for a long time. I don't really care. I saw The Force Awakens with my grandchildren, my grandsons, my wife and I flanking these 2 little boys who were in hog heaven, and the 2 of us walked out of there both admitting how much we regretted we didn't bring iPods so we can close our eyes and listen to a book. It was, I did a review of the new movie, Sight Unseen, on Facebook when it first came out. Because I knew what, I said, I'm not gonna see this movie, but this is what the movie is. It's gonna be a lot of acting involving foreheads and eyebrows. There'll be a lot of running with hands held like spades. And there will be no humor except kind of moronic chock-a-block, the sort of thing you're used to seeing in Barrel House stupid silent comedy. And there will be absolutely no presence of any adult behavior identifiable by anyone older than a 15-year-old boy. I stand by this. I said to Chris Gage didn't show up at the convention. Yes, he had a commitment, he couldn't make it out. And I said it would be really good to see him and blah, blah, blah. And I said, seeing you would be like a Christmas miracle or like a Star Wars movie I'd actually go see, you know. If I'd been 15 when the movie came out, I probably would have loved it to pieces. But the movie was simply a collection of everything I'd been reading since I was 6. And, you know, it just doesn't interest me. And I also find it kind of degenerate. It's utter lack of sex. It's pointed lack of sex. It's pointed aversion and avoidance of anything even smacking of human desire is so off-putting to me. I find it really ugly that it completely disavows the concept of human desire. And it's just, its boyishness is repulsive to me. And there you go.
So what you're saying is,
And again, I don't give a fuck if you like it. No, I'm serious. I mean, it's unlike those censorious schmucks on the left. I have no desire whatsoever to control the audience's taste in anything. I believe that the whole idea of trigger warnings is constitutionally averse to the concept of fictional narrative. You know, that if your feelings are going to be hurt by something you're reading, you got to get the fuck out more. You really do. And you maybe have to question the upbringing your parents gave you and led you to believe you were entitled to be that protected by a world which will never protect you. The world is an ugly place. They didn't call life brutish and short just to get a nice poem out of it. We're done. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you so much.